Hi everyone, welcome back to Dobby Books again, and in this video I want to do my Friday night check-in as to what I'm reading. If you remember from the last video, I showed you the stack of books that have been assigned to me for the semester, and I wanted to start working my way through those before school starts in approximately 10 days. So this is what I've gotten through so far. I read The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, and this is one of our literature and translation books. It was written by Luis Sepúlveda, and it was translated by Peter Bush from the Spanish. And Luis Sepúlveda is a Chilean author. And this story, The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, is about a if I get this right, a native Peruvian who, through a series of circumstances, is adopted by a native tribe in the Amazon. He spends many years with this tribe. He learns their ways. He learns how to hunt. He really builds a close bond with them. And then something happens, and the tribe, in obedience to their tribal traditions and religious beliefs, have to send him away. He can no longer live with the tribe. So this man eventually has to be alone after so many years of being in a community. He moves into this small little village near a coastline somewhere in the Amazon, where the European colonists have sent a mayor to supervise, the native peoples, and not the tribals, but the native inhabitants. And the previous mayor that they had is very much loved by them. He was a very competent and compassionate person. But something happens, and he is then replaced with a fool, really, someone they do not respect, someone who sees himself as separate from the natives, superior to the natives. They just have no respect. They tolerate him, but they don't respect him. And one day, some of the villagers bring in on a canoe the body of a white man that they found. The mayor, of course, immediately wants to accuse these villagers of having killed them and tried to hide it. And he brings up, bogus, oh, you did this and you did that. See, it makes perfect sense, and you brought him here and expect to get away with it. And the old man, who normally just sits in a certain area near the water, was watching all this very quietly. And at some point, he addresses the mayor and says, "You're wrong. Look at the man's wounds. Look at his facial expression, etc." And from those points that he makes, he's able to show the mayor, and of course the rest of the villagers who are now hanging on his every word, that no man killed this person, but rather an animal. And he tells them which animal, what species of animal killed him, why this animal killed him, and that this animal is now on the prowl. He's in pursuit of more humans to kill. Amazing. And the mayor, just kind of huffs and huffs, but he has to accept what, I think Antonio is the name of the character, of what he says. And so in this story, there's some flashback, of course, to the old man's life in the tribe, and so you start to learn how he knows everything that he knows. Eventually, the mayor gets the old man to come with him on this expedition to finally corner this animal and kill it, because now it's killed the third person, and they're just worried. Because Antonio has told them this animal is no longer on the other side for a village. It's actually on our side of the island, so you need to watch out. So there they go on the expedition. He doesn't want to go, he actually sympathizes with the animal. He doesn't see it as this horrible, terrible beast like the mayor does. And as they're walking through the forest, whatever, and the mayor is getting in their way and slowing them down, really just a pain in the neck. Eventually, the mayor offers him like $5,000 if he will go alone to confront this beast. And when he comes back, the mayor promises to pay him $5,000. And Antonio is more anxious to just get rid of the mayor and everybody else, because the mayor mostly gets in everybody's way, and he just wants him out of his hair. So that's where the climax of the story hits. This story has an ending that kind of makes you think. Not a cliffhanger kind of ending, but just an ending where you read those last words. Cool endings. As you're reading the story, it's a fairly easy read. It flows well, but just as you're reading it, you're going to notice that in many of the sentences, there are words right in the middle of the sentence that are capitalized. And this happened over and over again. It was just like my brain just had trouble working through that. It took a while. And then I would ask myself, why? What is the meaning of that? And I was trying to think back to something literary, then something cultural. I haven't found my answer yet, but that's what you're going to see in this book. All in all, this was a good read, and you get through it fairly quickly. It's a short book. So again, this is The Old Man Who Read Love Stories by Luis Sepúlveda. Next one I read was Signs Preceding the End of the World, another literature and translation book. Yuri Herrera, translated by Lisa Dillman. And in this story, again, another short read. The setting is the border. And on the Mexican side of the border, the protagonist's name is Máquina. Now, it's interesting that the names in this book are very interesting. Máquina means machine in Spanish. That had me thinking, wow, why is she Máquina? But anyway, throughout the whole book, I'm thinking, why this, why that? These adjectives attached to a person, and the whole way through. It's just wonderful. She is asked by her aunt to cross the border to go look for Máquina's brother, who left a few years before and didn't come back. Now, this is not at all unusual. Some people will leave. I will come back in a couple of years. I'll make some money, whatever. Some do, and some don't. They like the life on the other side of the border. So now she's going to go, but she has to talk to certain people who are going to help her on the other side, because her aunt has that connection and they owe her a favor. So she goes to the first person, and his name is Mr. W. And Mr. W's name is spelled with the word double dash U rather than the letter W, which I found interesting. The next person she has to visit is Mr. H. And his name is spelled not with the letter H, but with the word Aitch. And initially I was pronouncing it in my head, Aitch, but then it hit me, no, W. Okay. So that's the second person she has to talk to. And the last person she has to talk to before she leaves is Mr. Q. So we have W, H, and Q. And when she crosses the border, the next person that she deals with is someone named Mr. P. And then the guy who helps her, who once she crosses over, is Chuco. Okay, so going to the first person, Mr. W. He is described in the story, and I wrote down the key words that struck me. Joyful, roundness, steam, beer, silence, alone, reading paper. He is the first person she meets. Well, she has to touch base with about her plans, because he will have connections that will help her to get going. And the setting where she meets him is in a steam room. And of course, he just has a towel on, so there comes that roundness, the steam. The joyfulness is that his behavior towards her is a joy. Máquina. He's happy to see her. Not over the top kind, not even with excitement, just joyful, a sort of calm, joyful. And he keeps near his feet a cooler filled with ice and bottles of beer. And he offers her a beer, and they both have a beer together. He reads his paper by taking each sheet off, and he sticks them on the walls of the steam room. And he reads them, and when he's done, he takes it off the wall and he goes on to the next page. He's sitting in this room alone, perfectly content, perfectly at peace with his paper. Someone enters, they don't disturb him. He knows how to interact, to have them just be part of that experience. The next person that she meets was Mr. H, and he's quite different. She has to go see him next, and he has a very different ambiance in his room. She has to walk through a bar that's kind of an old bar that smells of liquor and urine. Okay, so that's your setting. She has to walk past that room to a dark, small room behind it. And that is where Mr. H is sitting, but he's not alone. He has two other thugs with him. All three of these men have guns. And the adjectives describing Mr. H are guns, sinister, snake, pulque, bird shirt, gold jewelry. So here's this man sitting with a group of men in the back room with his ego. He's wearing a bird shirt, lots of gold jewelry. So that totally sets us, you know what this guy is like. He is this, on the surface, this is the kind of person I am, and don't mess with me. I've got guns, I've got my entourage. Very different from Mr. W. And the snake part is that he's not one to be trusted. He will smile at you and as if he's your good friend and he's out to help you, but be careful because he's got something planned. And Makina knows this. She's ready for it. So she finds out what it is he wants in exchange for his help to get her to the other side, to get her a connection, to get her across the border. The last person she has to touch base with is Mr. Q. Now, Mr. Q, like Mr. W, is alone when she goes to see him. He, too, is also reading a paper. But his setting is, he's a very precise person. In that room, it's quiet. So there's no steam in the background like there is with Mr. W. She's just in a room by himself. He is dressed in black from top to bottom. When she enters the room and he sees her, he doesn't speak. He doesn't address her. He simply gives the slightest little edge with his head. And that, she understands, is her invitation to have a seat. He doesn't waste a movement or a word. Everything is very precise. It's not as comfortable in that room. He too says, all right, I'll get to the other side. But he also, I think if I'm thinking of the right person, he's very deliberate because you're going to get to the other side and you're going to find your brother. And almost like he's planning or prophesying. Very interesting character. So now she's on her journey and she's going to be getting to the other side. She meets Mr. P. I believe that's right. He gets her to a certain point after she's gotten across the border, and then from there she meets Chuko. Chuko is the one that's supposed to bring her as far as she can go to meet her brother. But they're stopped by this lone cowboy, I give him the title, this Yahoo patriot guy who stops them and, I'm not going to let you people ruin our country, blah, 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 blah. Just, kind of eye roll kind of guy. And he has a gun and he's calls the cops, yeah, I got two of them here, and he gives them some bogus story and these two have to wait. And at a certain point, Chuko gives her the signal, when I give you the signal, I want you to run on that road that goes in that direction. Don't look back. So she ends up having to do that. Chuko gets in a sort of scuffle with the cowboy guy, knocks him out, but the cops already arrive at that point. She keeps walking. She hears gunfire, and at a certain point, once she gets past a certain point, she then looks back and she sees that Chuko has his, I guess he's on his knees, his hands behind his back, the cops are there, and then at one point, now he's lying, they have him lying down on the ground. That's where that part ends for Chuko. You don't know what happens to him. You don't know if he gets arrested, if he escapes, if he dies, you don't know. The rest of the story is Makina working her way to find her brother. And there's some really difficult times for her, physically and emotionally. Eventually, she encounters someone she met when she started her trip, someone she met on a bus. And he's eventually able to give her that final connection that brings her to her brother. And when she sees her brother, there's lots of surprises for her. She hears, the story of what happened to him. And then something after that happens to her. And that's the part where this story, when you get to the ending, it also leaves you thinking. I'm still thinking about this ending because I have questions. And I'm rolling it around, and I've come to the conclusion that I cannot wait till we read this book as a class, and we can all discuss whatever we want on this, because I've got questions. And I want to hear what everyone else has, what conclusions they've come to, or what questions they have, because this book really has me asking those questions. Good read, quick read. I got this done too. So, third book that I'm reading is not related to the semester. This is one I got independently, and I don't know if I mentioned it in the last video. It's The Soul After Death by Father Seraphim Rose. This is coming from an Eastern Orthodox perspective. And the reason I got this was this author is exploring NDEs, near-death experiences. And this was written in 1980. So it was early on with NDEs. And in this book, I've only just reached to chapter 2. He wants to include and address the different perspectives. So he talks about those experts or scientists who sort of poo-poo the idea of an afterlife. So they're looking at these NDEs as something that's maybe a result of a hallucination or something happening in the brain as it's deprived of oxygen. So they're seeing it as a purely physical, non-reality thing that's happening. He also addresses other secular writers. For example, there's Dr. Raymond Moody, Life After Life. I have this book, and I've read this book. I mean, he addresses the claims of Dr. Moody. He also talks about Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and what she has to say about the same topic. And he also incorporates some Orthodox texts. He brings up one which is read by both the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church, and the Western Church, the Catholic Church. Pope St. Gregory the Great. I already knew that Pope St. Gregory had writings, the dialogues. But what I didn't know is that in those dialogues, I think in book 4, Pope Gregory addresses some NDEs. I didn't know that. So that's very interesting. And I like how he's addressing it. So it's not just one perspective. What caught my eye is that he really wants to look at this, all the information, and he is going to be coming from his Orthodox influence. For example, when he talks about there are those who are, now this is him speaking, those saints, Christians who live holy lives, who see those who've already passed away, and those who are not Christians, those who are not Orthodox, whatever, who also see people who have already died. He refers to the former, the ones that the saint sees, as apparitions or true manifestations. And then for the others, they're seeing, he refers to those as seeming manifestations, when they see loved ones. Whereas with the saints, it's not that they're seeing someone just, as they're dying and they're approaching that threshold, if you will. That veil is now either pulled back or it's very thin, so things are kind of crossing over. He is looking at it that when it comes to saints, these saints aren't necessarily dying. They're not about to die. They're just having their regular, everyday life. And those who have passed away, visit them. These are tangible visits of people who have died, who come to these saints. Now, I'm aware of these stories, obviously, with my Catholic upbringing. I've learned of these stories while growing up. The most recent one that I know of is Padre Pio. He passed away in the early 1960s. And he was the stigmatist, Franciscan monk who lived in San Giovanni Rotondo in Italy. And he talked about visitations that he would have of souls who had passed and came to him asking for prayers. And these people would come at night and knock on the door of the monastery. And I believe those were his turn. I guess they'd taken on a rotation, answering the door or whatever. And he opened the door. I thought it was a visitor, spoke with them, whatever, and then they would leave and sort of disappear when they leave. And that's when he realized, wow, okay, this was a soul who had passed. So this is a very common thing among the Western and Eastern churches. These are just accepted occurrences. So Father Seraphim incorporates all these different stories and perspectives as he goes through this book. I'm only in chapter 2. I've only just started, but I like the fact that he's doing that and not just coming from one viewpoint. He's just trying to include all of them. So I'm curious to see how this is going to move forward. And it's The Soul After Death by Father Seraphim Rose. The publisher is, I don't know, I can't read it. St. Herman of Alaska Brotherhood. This originally was published in 1980, and the author passed away in 1982. This is a reprint from 2022. So there we go. That's everything I've read, and that's it. I might be going to the library tomorrow. I don't know, but you'll find out if there's a video. If you liked what you heard, everyone, please feel free to push that like and subscribe button. Thanks for spending time and take